Well, at least you didn't have Ezra Miller. After 9 years, the Flash TV show has finally ended at the CW network, effectively ending the Arrowverse as a whole. And this is the only show that I've seen a substantial amount within the Arrowverse. I've seen some episodes of Arrow, I saw a few of Supergirl, and I avoided Batwoman and Black Lightning like the plague. And I didn't really watch Legends of Tomorrow either. So, how did this show end? Well, you all know that this show has been declining ever since season 1. So, no, it did not end well. This is quite a terrible. This is one of the worst finales I've seen since the ending of How I Met Your Mother. So, I haven't really talked about most of the seasons. I'll probably do like an entire rant about the entire show. And I want to press this right off the bat. This is not going to be a review that's like, oh my god, an organized review. This is just going to be a straight up rant because I hated this season so much. I have no idea how, but Eric Wallace managed to outsuck season 7. How the hell do you do that? But, okay, I'll give a brief rundown of the other seasons, like, very brief. First 2 seasons, first off, what I've been saying for the last couple years is that there are 3 different versions of this show. Pre-Flashpoint, post-Flashpoint, and the Eric Wallace era. So pre-Flashpoint, which is seasons 1 and 2, are passable seasons of television. They're not masterpieces like people claim they are now. I mean, sure, they look like masterpieces compared to seasons 6, 7, 8, and 9, but that's like saying Terminator 3 is a masterpiece comparing it to Genesis. But they're not bad seasons of television. They're just fine. They're passable. They have shitty dialogue and bad effects and a lot of really cringeworthy moments, but they're still decent television. But then after Flashpoint, things start to hit the crapper. Season 3 wasn't god-awful, but it had too many issues to overlook. Season 4 was straight up trash. And Season 5 was a slight improvement, but only slight. Then the Eric Wallace era came along and flushed everything down the toilet yet again. Season 6 was god-awful. Season 7 is one of the worst seasons of television ever produced. Season 8 was a slight improvement, but again, that means absolutely nothing. And then this season is probably the worst season this show has ever had. So let's get started. It starts with the Red Death arc, and I made a video before the season started about Red Death, and it turns out every single fear I had about this character in the show was true. The acting out of Javacia Leslie is fucking horrendous. They tried to make her act like this unhinged lunatic, but it came across like a 5-year-old throwing a fucking tantrum. It wasn't intimidating. She's not intimidating in the slightest. The suit is like extremely bulky. It looks fucking stupid. And she's only actually an active villain for 2 episodes out of the 5. And trust me, we'll get more into that in the New World arc. And the heroes are still uninteresting. Barry is he's a terrible protagonist still. And the supporting cast is so god-awful. Chester, Allegra, and Cecile are some of the worst characters of television I've ever seen, yet Wallace continues to shove them in the forefront. And I figured out why he does this with Allegra, because he created Allegra with the comics. Yeah, that explains a lot. And a lot of these characters in this season are not characters from the comics, like the new version of Caitlin Snow named Keone, who's one of the most insufferable characters I've ever had to sit through. She is... The way they try to write her, they give her this, like, childlike innocence, but wise beyond her years, but it's cringy. Her dialogue is cringy, and the acting out of Danielle Panabaker, who's usually pretty good as Caitlin Snow, is awful. And again, it's not her fault, because the way she's directed and the dialogue she's given is atrocious. Now, I will say this had one decent episode to it with episode 3, Rogues of War, where Barry and Hartley Rathaway build up a team of their own, their new rogues, in order to take on Red Death. And this is already an interesting concept, and they bring together some characters that we've seen before, like Hartley's part of the team. They bring in Chilblain, who's still fucking here for some reason, and I still hate him. They bring the dude from last season. I can't remember the guy's name because I haven't seen the episode since it came out. It's the dude who can shoot fire. I can't remember his name. And then there's Goldface. And I was worried when I saw the promo and I saw Goldface was attached, but honestly, he was actually pretty fun this season, which is probably largely due to the fact that Emulet Black is nowhere to be found, and thank God for that. So at least they listened to one criticism of the show, and that is my main problem with this show, is that the people behind the show refuse to take criticism. They see the criticism, and it's not even just like, oh, a few reviews say this. Literally what I've been saying for every single video I've done for this show, I've seen other reviews of people saying the exact same thing. So it's not just me. Everybody has the same issues. And it would be one thing if they ignored the criticism, but it seems like they're pulling the Teen Titans Go route, where they are actively trying to mock the people who are criticizing the show by putting everything people hate at the forefront. And again, we'll get back to that during the New World arc. But again, so the Rogues of War episode was pretty fun. The first 2 episodes were boring as hell, but they weren't inherently awful. Then the 2 episodes with Red Death were atrocious. The speedster fight was ridiculous. Apparently Barry is now a Green Lantern because he just creates a shield out of his lightning. And it'd be one thing if maybe he threw his lightning up as a shield or something, but he literally creates a Captain America shield several times throughout this season. So I guess speedsters are just Green Lanterns now. Fucking fantastic. So after that, and my main problem with Red Death is not the acting. And it's not the writing. Well, it's partially the writing, but it's not what you think. And, before I get into that, there are a lot of Batman references, from other movies and shows, and they're terrible. Her first line outside of the suit is, "I am vengeance," and it's the most over-the-top, cringy nonsense I've ever seen. They also do a reference to the "Let's Get Nuts" line from the 1989 movie, and it doesn't match the scene at all, and it made me almost fucking throw my phone. But, okay, so my main problem with Red Death is the backstory. Now, they changed the backstory from the comics, where it's a combination of a dark Batman and the Flash. They changed that. And honestly, that's the least of this backstory's problem. The problem is, we don't see the backstory. It's told through exposition between her and Iris, and we never see it, so we're never given any reason to believe that this is real. In fact, Iris picks the story apart pretty quickly, and it's the only scene in which I've liked Iris West since, season 2. So, props for that, I guess, but it also does a detriment to your villain. Because, again, the way she tells her backstory is, the Flash turned on her and sent his rogues after her. But, again, Iris picks it apart pretty quickly and figures out that she's a deranged lunatic, and Flash sent his rogues after her, or teamed up with his rogues as a last resort. So, yeah, that arc is probably one of the worst ones we've ever gotten. Then we had, I shit you not, 4 episodes of filler. And if this was a 20-episode season, I could have let that go. But this is the final season with only 13 episodes. So we already have a 5-episode arc, then we get 4 episodes of virtually no story, and then we get a 4-episode arc to finish off the series. I'm going to breeze through these filler episodes pretty quick, because honestly, I skimmed through them. The Good, the Bad, and the Lucky is the episode 6 is now the lowest rated episode of the show, and for good reason. I got maybe 10 minutes into this movie. As soon as I figured out that this was going to be focused on Keone, and that Barry was not going to show up at all, I gave up. So, moving on. The next episode was, an episode involving Dreamer from Supergirl, and the stories revolving around her and Iris. Yay. And, again, no Flash. Barry's here, and then we do get a reference to the Justice League. A very brief one, and it doesn't lead to shit, but at least it was there. Again, I got nothing for this episode. It's terrible, it's stupid, it's pointless, and there's no Flash. And then the next one is just as bad. At least Barry's a main character in the next one, where they're, like, stuck in this room with, a bunch of people, and I think Lady Kronos was the villain for this one, but she was barely a villain. I don't even know what the plot of this episode was. I mean, I watched it all the way through, but I still can't figure out what Lady Kronos' goal was. I don't know. Did she get stuck in the past? I can't tell you. But the episode was shit. Then we get one with a revived Oliver Queen. Well, not a revived. He's a Spectre, and he's able to bring himself into the mortal realm for this episode. And we also get Wally West back for an episode, which is good, because Wally's one of the only characters on this show that haven't been completely botched. And it does give the reveal that we already knew, that the multiverse is still around, that Wally wasn't seeing other timelines. He was instead seeing a new multiverse. Because up to this point, the characters have been assuming the multiverse is dead. Which is kind of odd. You'd think he would have revived the entire multiverse, not just one universe, but whatever. And the villain for this is Bloodwork. Now, people say Bloodwork is the best villain that Eric Wallace ever did, which is the first one, so it's kind of sad. And he's the best one by default. But he's still not, but they turn him into some weird cartoonish villain. Like, I get, his motivations in Season 6 was that he wanted to cure his disease, and this whole thing happened because he was trying to cure himself of cancer, I think. And fine, that's fine, but then he says he wants to cure the entire world of, like, disease and everything, and, okay, one, that's just ripping off the lizard from Amazing Spider-Man, and done with a lot less nuance. But he's like a cartoonish villain, and he manipulates Wally. So Wally's the last person who should be able to get manipulated by fucking Bloodwork. So the speedster fight between Barry and Wally, the speedster fights in this season are incredibly short, and they don't involve any actual choreography. Like, my favorite speedster fight was probably Crisis on Earth X, where Barry and Thawne were actually, hitting each other. Or the fight in or their first fight in the stadium in Season 1, where they're actually hitting each other. But in this show, or in this season, they run around and throw lightning at each other. That's the extent of the choreography in this season. They run around throwing lightning at each other. That is it. So the speedster fights kind of suck, and we'll get more into that again in the New World arc. And Barry eventually snaps Wally out of it, and they team up with Oliver and Dig to take on Bloodwork. I don't remember how he's defeated, but it was probably dumb. But this episode was fine. It was more interesting than the previous 8 episodes combined, so at least there's that. But now we get to the New World arc, and the first episode was actually pretty decent. I mean, it has some issues, like the fact that Barry's parents are so, like, they like, care a little too much for this stranger that they barely know. And maybe if they'd thrown in a twist, like, maybe they know it's Barry from the future, that could have been something, but they don't, so it just comes across extremely contrived. But we finally get Matt Lightsher, I can't remember how to pronounce his name, as Eobard Thawne again. Actually, Eobard Thawne, not the amnesiac bullshit they pulled last season. And we finally get I've seen people refer to this episode as the show coming full circle. And honestly, this should have been the finale. This should have been the finale. Because like other people said, it comes full circle and has Barry and Thawne, and it finally has Barry there at the night of his mother's death. I was wondering if they were actually going to do that, and they did. However, this scene, as good as it was, has some issues. One, they didn't bother to change the suit in the first shot, so it looks really weird seeing the Season 1 suit and then jumping to the Season 9 suit. So that was kind of weird. And then The scene where Barry stops to warn his younger season 1 self from stopping Thawne killing his mother, the green screen effect was so bad I started laughing. It was that, I mean, I watched the scene a couple times afterwards to see if the effect was really that bad. It wasn't as bad as I remember, but the first time I saw it, the effect looked so bad that I busted out laughing. And then we don't see Flashpoint Barry and Thawne. Like, I was really hoping they would also show end of season 2 Barry stopping Thawne, and then post Flashpoint Thawne showing up to kind of keep with the continuity, like, okay, Flashpoint still happened. But the show's treating it like Flashpoint never happened now, which is extremely awkward. Oh, and speaking of Flashpoint, there's a lot of behind-the-scenes bullshit that I heard. Like, apparently Patty Spivot and Julian Albert were supposed to show up in this season as married as a crime-fighting unit called Hot Pursuit. And when I read that, I wanted to vomit. Thank God that didn't. Eric Wallace needs to never work with DC again. You know what? He shouldn't work in the entertainment industry again, if that's the kind of shit he's coming up with. And I know there's probably gonna be some people who tell me this in the comments, because I haven't mentioned it yet. Yes, I know that the recent season of Titans referenced this show as far as the multiverse goes, but I gave up on Titans halfway through season 3 because I got so fucking bored. But I did see him traveling the scene of Gar traveling the multiverse with Doom Patrol, Stargirl, even Teen Titans Go. So yeah, I already know. Oh, and Shazam was in there too. So yeah, I already know. The next 2 episodes barely feature Barry Allen. The second episode runs parallel to the first one, where it's showing everything that the rest of the team was doing while Barry was stuck in 2000. This did not need to be an episode, because nobody cared what the rest of these fuckers were doing. And they made Keone apparently like this goddess, like this protector of nature. And again, I didn't watch The Good, the Bad, the Lucky, so I don't really know where the hell that came from, but it's fucking dumb. And we get back to that in the finale. And Cobalt Blue is like possessing people, like it possessed Joe in 2000, and it possesses Mark. Does it possess anybody else? It possesses Nora in the next episode, but we'll get to that. So this episode just does absolutely nothing. The team is still uninteresting, and they take up too much space. Barry shows up for all of 3 minutes in this episode, and then disappears again. The next episode features Barry about halfway through, because it takes place in 2049, and the main character of this episode is Cecile. Why do you hate your audience, Eric Wallace? So not only is Cecile the main character of this episode, they make no effort to make the characters look older in 2049. I don't think Eric Wallace is very good at math. Because tell me, how many years from now is 2049? Time's up. It's 26 years. Eric Wallace treats this like it's 5 years down the road, maybe. Maybe. It's 26 years, yet Allegra, Chester, Cecile, and now Nora taking Barry's place. Because Barry, they do reference, like, the Watchtower in space, like, where the Justice League's headquarters are, so that was kind of neat. And that's where Barry is, the future Barry is during this episode. But, okay, for one, stop making episodes of The Flash, especially the last few episodes of The Flash, without The Flash. But he shows up halfway through, and we'll get there. But Chester, Allegra, and Cecile look no older than they do in 2023. And hell, when Eddie Thawne shows up, oh yeah, I forgot, because that shows how bad this story was, that I completely forgot about Eddie Thawne, despite the fact he's the main villain of the last few episodes. I forgot he was here. He shows up in 2049 trying to find the Flash. Why he showed up in 2049 is never explained, but... And they even comment about the fact that he looks no older than he did when he shot himself in 2015. Yet these people are 26 years older than they are in present day, and they look no older. At least with Iris, they gave her, like, some makeup and some, like, gray streaks in her hair to make her look a bit older. She doesn't look 26 years older. She looks maybe 15 years older, but at least it was an attempt. And again, the only scene I liked in this episode was, ironically, between Barry and Iris, and those scenes usually make me cringe. It was between Barry and future Iris, and it was actually a decent scene. Eddie Thawne is terrible in this season. Not only is it Rick Cosnett's acting extremely off, like, he was really good in season 1. And here, maybe he just couldn't get back into his role as easily because it's been so long, or you know what? Honestly, if I'm going to blame anybody for this, most likely the blame is going to point to Eric Wallace. Because he did write a lot of these episodes, and I'm assuming he had a firm say in the directing as well, even though he wasn't credited. So I'm going to pin most of the blame on Wallace here. But his acting is not very good. His story arc is bullshit. He becomes a villain just like that. And he doesn't act like either you needed to make him a completely different character, like a completely different Eddie Thawne, or you needed to make him exactly how he was in season 1. But they tried to, like, do it somewhere in between, and it doesn't work, because he's just not the character that we know anymore. And this season, and this show's been having a problem with flashbacks, where they treat their audiences like a bunch of idiots, by constantly whenever something from the past is mentioned, they flash back to it. This show's been having that fucking problem since season 2, but this season, season 8 and 9, were particularly guilty of this. There's a scene that happens in the beginning of episode 3 that's so fucking funny, where he, like, sees, like, a daughter that he and Iris could have had, and it's just Nora, but she has a short-haired blonde wig. It looked it made me fucking laugh when I saw that. And they flash back to it, like, 3 or 4 times in the span of an episode and a half. And every time something from the past is mentioned, especially in these past 2 seasons, we feel the need to have a flashback with this shitty-looking blue tint to it, because, again, the people who make this show think the audience has less brain cells than a fucking cinder block! Oh my god, I did not expect to get this angry, and I'm still not done! And then he finally becomes Cobalt Blue at the beginning of the next fucking episode. And Barry does show up at the end of the episode, just for Eddie to become Cobalt Blue. Actually, the fight between Barry and Cobalt Blue possessed Nora was actually pretty decent. Like, the fight itself wasn't anything special, but the effects looked good for once. Like, they're standing on, like, the edge of a roof, and there's, like, a green screen behind them of showing the rest of the city, and it looked good. Like, it looked like the show actually had a budget for a couple minutes. Why doesn't the rest of the show look this good? But then Cecile has to ruin the fun, giving her the name Virtue, who is a character from the comics, but it's not Cecile Horton. And she has a similar looking suit, and it looks stupid, by the way. The suit looks god-awful. And for some reason, she has it in 2023 in the next episode, despite her not getting the suit until 2049. Why? But it's also revealed that she and Joe are basically split up, almost. Like, she goes to visit the house, like, twice a year now, and why should we care? Why should we care about the second to last episode of The Flash? Why should we be giving a shit about Cecile's love life? Why? Because Joe doesn't show up here. He doesn't show up until the second half of the finale. So, then we get the finale. And this one had the most potential to be a great episode. It brings back Thawne, and Zoom, and Savitar, and Who Gives a Fuck Godspeed, but it's bringing back the other Speedster villains, and this could have been so cool. But I'll give you a guess. Just what happens in this show. Just what happens in this episode. Actually, the 2 things that happened in this episode that pissed me off the most. Actually, there's a lot of things that pissed me off the most, but Barry does not actually fight any of these speedsters, except for Cobalt Blue. the rest of his team fights them. And they beat them so easily that it's embarrassing. Zoom is taken out he runs around in a fucking circle in a tunnel, and this episode has some of the worst CGI I've ever seen. So many times when a speedster does like a little flip or something, they will like stutter in the air before landing, like it's a CGI puppet, but it's like they can't get them to do a full front flip without them like kind of like doing this. It's fucking weird because it happens more than once. It happens with Zoom, it happens with Nora. And for some reason, everybody has red lightning now. All the evil speedsters do. Even Cobalt Blue has red lightning, despite the fact that every other time Cobalt Blue possessed somebody, they had blue, or when he possessed Nora, she got blue lightning instead of her normal purple. Savitar's here, and he's red instead of blue. I was mentioning Zoom. He also has red lightning, so does Savitar and Godspeed. Zoom throws lightning at Keon and Mark. Keon just absorbs the lightning and throws it back at him, killing him instantly. Yay. The fight with Cecile fights Godspeed, and apparently she can fly now. Cue the Rise of Skywalker reference. I'm not going to show it because I'm not pulling in a clip from Rise of Skywalker. But especially since this is just a rant, I'm not doing any clips. But, oh my god. But she literally, like, Godspeed brings out a bunch of clones, and they start trying to attack her. She's just, like, flailing her arms around like this, like, just doing a bunch of force pushes, and they just go down instantly. They are fucking speedsters! And she's moving at normal speed, flailing her arms around like an idiot, and they just go down instantly. This is one of the most pathetic fights I've ever seen. But then... oh, there's also Savitar fights Nora. Savitar never unmasks himself, which is fucking weird, because this is essentially a fight between a father and daughter, which could have been cool, but he never unmasks himself, and then he does the thing he does to Iris, stabs her, but she, like, phases through it, pulls it off so super fucking easily, like, she doesn't even have to, like, put any effort, just, like, it's made of styrofoam, and then she stabs him in the back, apparently killing him right there, even though it didn't look like she stabbed him very far, it looks like she just stabbed him in the armor. But he dies instantly. Where was that knowledge in season 3? Where it's like the thing from Incredibles, where you can just stab right through it with its own metal. But Thawne is taken out probably the worst, because he goes to kill Chester. I'm not sure why, but he goes full on Palpatine with lightning instead of using his vibrating hand, which means of course Chester survives because no one can actually die on this show. And then he gets taken out super easily by Allegra. You see what do you believe me now when I said that Eric Wallace created Allegra, so now he's trying his damnedest to make people like her? By having her be the person who finally defeats the Reverse Flash? Oh my god. Can someone pull a vibrating hand on Eric Wallace? Just a thought. But then there's the fight between Barry and Cobalt Blue, which we go from an episode having pretty decent CGI with a speedster fight to having some of the worst CGI this show has ever seen. Like, I think I own a PS2 and I have plenty of games for it. Every single one of those games looks better than the CGI in this fight scene. It's fucking atrocious. And then, despite Cobalt Blue, this being the only episode where he's the actual villain, he stopped about halfway through. Barry just convinces him to be a good guy, and I'm sick of this happening in this show. It happened too many times in Season 7, and Barry just convinces him to be a good guy. And it wasn't even his idea to do it, it was Keon. And Jay Garrick shows up in this episode and does fuck all. And, oh my god, there's so much I want to talk about this finale, but it would take its own video. So, moving ahead, you're probably wondering, if the first half of this episode, the conflict is resolved less than halfway through, what the hell else were we supposed to do for the next 25 minutes and change? Well, absolutely nothing. Seriously, the plot just meanders for another 25 minutes. We learn that Chester still has his black hole powers from Season 6, which the showrunners just forgot about until now. Like, I thought he was a metahuman, but apparently he wasn't, and all of a sudden he is again. Just whatever. They finally have Nora as a baby, and I don't care. And Keon, ascends to be the new goddess, the goddess of nature, I guess? I don't know. Leaving Caitlyn to basically be revived. So apparently she just hijacked her body for some time. And the fact that the characters never addressed the fact that Caitlyn actually died and makes this whole scene feel completely flat. Because none of them acknowledged that she basically died when Keon was created, and now I'm supposed to feel for them when she's finally back. You can't... Oh my god, I hate Eric Wallace so much. So let's just wrap this up. It ends with Barry... The episode ends with Barry just running around. He throws lightning, giving some cameos to other speedsters. Avery Cho, who we actually saw in Season 8. Max Mercury, and Jesse Chambers. And I'll tell you this much. Jesse Chambers is blonde in the comics, not black with white hair. So apparently CW isn't done race swapping for no reason. And this character doesn't even have a line, she's just there. So you seriously couldn't just cast any blonde chick out there to better match the character? Oh, I hate Hollywood. And then he gives some, monologue and everything. I do kind of like the beginning where he does the "to understand what I'm about to tell you" monologue. When the episode starts, that was kind of nice, but other than that, this is probably the worst episode of the show. Well, it was the most infuriating episode of the show. So yeah, Season 9, complete bust. Acting. Everybody except for Grant Gustin, who seems to be trying for the first time since Season 6. Everybody's bad. The characters are so poorly written. The action sequences are garbage. The stories are meandering bullshit. The villains are laughably bad or just infuriating. I hated this season so much. This is easily the worst season of the show, which says a lot if you saw Season 7. I'm giving this an F. Fuck this show, fuck Eric Wallace, and thank God it's over. So, thank you so much for watching, and I will have to suffer through the Flash movie in a few days, or in a few weeks, but honestly, could it be worse than this? Actually, don't answer that. So yeah, I'll see you all next time. Bye.